welcome to the Brave Woman, Mighty God podcast. I'm your host, Laura L. Smith. Join me as I chat with the most amazing guests about how God can and will empower us to do the same brave things the women of the Bible did. Stand up for justice, say yes, be the change, do the crazy things, step into freedom, find community, reach out, share our gifts, and so much more. Make sure you're following the show so you don't miss a single episode. Today, I'm chatting with Jenn Kautsch. You might know her as the founder and creator of the SoberSis community and leader in the Sober Curious movement. It's her passion and life's calling to create a space where women can renegotiate their relationship with alcohol without labels, judgment, or shame. She has a monthly 21-day reset challenge and is the author of Look Alive, Sis. She lives in Fort Worth, Texas with her hubby of almost 30 years and has 2 adult children in their mid-20s. Jenn, thank you so much for being on the Brave Woman, Mighty God podcast with me today. So excited to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here, and I love the name of your podcast.
Thank you.
It's so good.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Jenn, we know each other from a writers group call that we're on once a month, which is so fun. But you're kind of known publicly as the Sober Sis. Can you tell us a little bit about this name of yours and how it came to be?
I can. Well, thank you again for having me. And you're right. I am AKA out there known as SoberSis, which is kind of crazy because I grew up without being a drinker until my 30s. So the fact that I am speaking into this topic is exactly where I'm supposed to be for sure. Honestly, with SoberSis, which I'll explain a little bit more what it is, I honestly created what I wished I could have found. And God's hand has been at the forefront of this ministry since the very beginning, really through my own story. And I think oftentimes that's how it happens. You know, we've got the mess, so we've got the message. And I think it's important to know just right off the top, you know, when you're talking about a substance like alcohol, people tend to think black or white, all or nothing. Either you're an alcoholic or you're not. And I'm kind of here representing, I think, a lot of women in your audience who may find themselves in the gray area of drinking. And that's where I found myself. And I created a safe place where women can wrestle in their relationship with alcohol kind of out loud, like figure it out without having shame, judgment, even the need for a label, especially if you're in that quote gray area drinking zone, which I'm happy to define more. But I think what we've done in SoberSis is focused more on our presence and our sober mind than just being quote a sobriety club or a sisterhood of women who would identify even as being sober. So
can you back up a second and define gray drinker? Because I know that's a term that you talk about a lot, but I hadn't heard of it until I encountered you.
For sure. And I hadn't heard of it until around 2017 when God just took a hold of my life and started taking me on this freedom journey. And it was honestly hearing different words like gray area drinking or an alcohol-free lifestyle. Like people were vegan or gluten-free. I didn't know you could choose to be alcohol-free for positive reasons. For health, for wellness, for just more alignment. So what I learned and what I love educating just people on, because I agree it's not as known as I think it should be, is that there is a full drinking spectrum. And anyone that drinks at all is on that drinking spectrum. And so, in fact, now it's called alcohol use disorder. So anything that has a spectrum, you can be somewhere on that spectrum. And the gray area is when you can take it or leave it, but you tend to take it more than you leave it. But you can. You're not to the point. And again, it's a hazy line. So where it kind of turns into that physical addiction. But a lot of it for me, I can just speak about my own experience, was a lot more mental and emotional. Quite honestly, I know you're a woman of faith, and that's a lot of your audience right there. And so for me, it was also very spiritual. And I didn't know that when I picked up that first drink as an adult and gave it such value.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about this in a broader sense. So you said you had gotten to an area you didn't drink, and then you were drinking more than was actually healthy for you. And I think we're all guilty of maybe doing something that's not healthy for us. And this can be, it's because we live in this wonderful world, right? And culture is telling us that all these things are normal and fine and maybe even glamorous or at least accepted. And this can be such a range of things. Listeners, it could be anything from having sex outside of marriage. I can't think of a movie or TV show that doesn't show that as glamorous and exciting, to just mindlessly scrolling on our phones to numb or avoid an awkward conversation, which there's such a range of things that we do that just aren't healthy for us or life-giving because culture is saying, yeah, that's fine. That's
Right.
normal, at least. And I think that's how drinking is too. Drinking is very much said, it's normal, it's glamorous, it's how you celebrate, it's what
So
you do.
much.
And it can be done. There are a lot of
Yes.
people who handle this in a very healthy way. But when it's done for the wrong reasons, when it's done to avoid our emotions or when it's done in an unhealthy way, then this can become dangerous. And a lot of it comes from, like I said, these normalizations, right? That the world is like, oh, that's cool, that's normal, it's fine, it's great, or at least it's accepted. No one's going to say anything to you about it. But I am huge. Anyone who listens to me or follows me at all, you guys know I'm so big on tearing down the lies of this world and replacing it with Christ's truth.
Yeah.
It matters so much. So, Jen, what are some lies that alcohol or the alcohol industry promises us?
Oh,
And some truth that we can combat these lies with, because it's one thing to know the lie, but unless we have some truth to knock it down,
I
you know?
love that question. And because you're prepared and you asked me that in advance, so it was easy actually for me to come up with a list of the promises and a list of the truth. And Laura, you really hit on something, and that was it doesn't matter whether it's alcohol or anything else, any kind of toxic, unhealthy behavior that we do as basically a solution to a problem. And that's what I was doing with alcohol. It was for me, whether I was anxious, bored, lonely, tired, all the things, or even celebrating, even for positive reasons, it had become a solution. And it wasn't really the problem. It was
Right.
just a poor solution. So, yeah, I think in our very alcohol centric world, like you said, you just look around, it's just everywhere. And again, that in and of itself is not a problem. That's not the problem. The
Right.
problem is what value are we assigning to it? Or, yeah, what do we think it's going to do? And what is it really going to do? We're promised things like it will totally be anxiety relief or, stress support. We're told that it'll bolster your confidence. That's a good one. That you need it for social occasions. A lot of people drink out of social anxiety. They get to a networking event or a party or a wedding, and it's like, where is the bar? I need a drink to just start to feel a little bit more comfortable with that awkward moment, even as adults, when we're getting to know new people or just kind of showing up someplace. It's a lot of different energies meeting in the room of just different stories that we all hear in our heads and
Yeah.
different insecurities. And so, alcohol promises us more confidence. Alcohol literally promises us more connection, that you need it to connect on a date night with your husband, that you need it to have fun on the girls' weekend. Quite honestly, we've even been taught it'll help us connect with ourselves. That's a way to kind of unwind and get to your feelings or just relax. We've been told that it's celebration. In fact, I'm sure many of your listeners can agree. We've even been told it's self care.
Mm-hmm.
We've been told that it's actually a reward, kind of like me time. And so you can be doing all the right things all day, just like I was. I mean, I was waking up and having my prayer time and just really connecting with the Lord and then hitting my workout class. Usually not the early one, the one kind of mid morning. So I could kind of, work out the fog from the night before maybe. And then, have my healthy salad at lunch. And before we know it, it seems like a self-care reward for doing all the right things to do something that feels a little bit indulgent. And again, there's nothing wrong with a reward, but is it true? And then obviously, we've been taught and shown that it's a cure for boredom and loneliness. And having done this work since 2018, I was way into this when COVID hit. And I was able to see worldwide the effect of loneliness and boredom and alcohol use. It was
Yeah.
off the charts, off the charts. And it's no wonder. Again, it was used as a solution.
Right.
It had not even maybe been a problem. Some of your listeners are like, oh my gosh, she's saying what happened in their life in 2020, 2021. They had a kind of benign relationship with drinking. It was just kind of there, kind of a pleasantry here and there, but no big deal. And things shifted. So, and that's how drinking can change over time. Sometimes it's circumstantial. So that's kind of my list
Yeah.
of what alcohol and the marketing and the messaging, especially to women, kind of tells us. Like, you need it for all of these things. And we're like, yeah, right. Yeah, we do.
So I'm
And
hearing all those things and I'm like, yeah, like there's like you said, there's nothing wrong with rewarding ourselves. But the truth is alcohol or overspending or pornography or uh you name it is not actually the answer. Jesus is the answer. He loves us. He says we are beloved and chosen and royal and holy. And so when we're in the room and it's awkward, we can be like, yeah, but I'm a daughter of the one true king.
that's right. It really does go back to a lot of our identity in Christ and what lies are we believing and what is actually true.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some other truths besides? So we talked about the lies, and I just kind of threw out there, I kind of answered your question for you. Sorry that, Jesus is actually the answer to a lot
He's
of
the
these
answer.
things.
He's the end all be all answer. But there are some real practical answers as well to some of these things that we're living in the world. And so we can be in the world and not of the world. So if we're going to do that, we have to know. And I'm really passionate about the science and the practical strategies
Yeah.
because as a Christian wife and mother struggling in this area, I needed all of the above. I needed the identity in Christ shift, but I already knew that. I just wasn't walking in it. But I
How to
did
apply
need
it.
the science and strategy. So yeah, the truth is alcohol or any numbing substance or activity. Because again, if alcohol is not your thing, this podcast is still for you. Don't go,
Right.
plug it in. It is temporary relief, but does not provide real rest for our
So more like
mind.
Band-Aids than
It's a
healing.
Band-Aid. I
Yeah.
mean, so often if you're doing any of the above, really what we're looking for is rest. We're weary, we're tired, we're overwhelmed, and we need rest. An activity like let's just go to a happy hour, grab a drink is going to work temporarily. It's about a 20 to 30-minute fix. And what happens is you need more of that to get the same effect. That is the nature of an addictive substance like alcohol. And so Matthew 11:28 says, here's the truth. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest.
Amen.
And so that's the rest we're looking for. And so oftentimes, I think in the evening, it's really just getting real and going, I want relief because that's fast, but I really need rest. How do I get there?
Mhm.
And that's a different pathway. It's a different mindset altogether. Another thing, we've been told that alcohol, like other things, gives us more confidence. And I'm here to say alcohol made me second guess myself.
Interesting.
It really made me second guess myself because I'd grown up in college and through my 20s really as a non-drinker. I didn't second guess myself when I walked in a room. I knew how I was going to present myself because I was present in my own body. I didn't
Mhm.
have to worry about if I was glassy-eyed or, if one had affected me more. I didn't have to worry about that. What I noticed when I started socially drinking, I mean, it took me a long time to get to the point where I really felt like it was unhealthy. It was a slow process. And I didn't have a big rock bottom. I didn't get a DUI. I didn't have anything crash and burn. In fact, externally, I kind of look like everybody else. So this is an inside job. And that's often true with a gray area drinker. You're not going to know it. You're going to look at their life and it is all together and very high functioning to the point they're over functioning. Really, that's a whole nother topic. But I would often keep promises to everybody else,
Mm.
but break them to myself.
Wow. Okay.
And so that's where the confidence was eroding, is because I didn't even trust myself. I was
Yeah.
like, you say you're not going to drink tonight at 10 a.m. while you're feeling all the willpower and decision fatigue hasn't set in.
Right.
You've just got good intentions. What's going to happen at 5 o'clock? You know what you're going to do. And that was also the voice of the enemy
For sure.
whispering in my ear, you need me. You can't do this without me. Just using the substance of alcohol as that
Right.
crutch.
Right.
And then here's another one. This one's huge. I really bought into this one, hook, line, and sinker. The alcohol is going to help us connect. It's going to bring us connection. And I'm here to say, think about it. At the very core, alcohol is disconnecting. Whether you're alone in your kitchen cooking at 5 o'clock, stirring spaghetti sauce with your red wine, or you're on a date night, or you're on a girls' night, when you start drinking, you start to lose your presence. Your mind becomes altered. That can be slightly altered or greatly altered, but it's not 100% sober minded. You're just not 100% there. And again, to each their own. But if you're going for connection, if you're literally trying to connect, it is actually disconnecting, because when people start drinking together, they start thinking usually about their next drink, not about what the person's saying.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So
I
the
do. I think we just show up less authentically ourselves.
Yeah, no, those are all really good and those are really honest. Like, thank you for sharing like that this is how like and you talk more about some specific examples in your book, Look Alive Sis. We hear some examples from your life on a
Yeah.
date night with your husband. And I know there's a woman in there going on a girls' trip and talking about how those were hopeful connections and it actually falls through.
Woo! One
Yeah.
of
So
those.
if
Yeah.
we're fed all these lies and Jesus
Yeah.
is actually the answer, whether it's for our confidence because we can be confident in who he's made us to be, whether it's for our rest because he promises to give us rest, whether it's for our peace after a hectic day because he is the Prince of Peace. Like when I keep hearing you say, like, because this, and it's like Jesus is actually the answer. So the Bible actually gives us some instruction on then how to apply this. Like, okay, so now we've said, here are some lies. Here are some lies we believed or might even be living in, but Jesus is actually the answer for all of these. You talk a lot about Romans 12 too, which I love, which is do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Now that verse is gorgeous and it totally applies to what we're talking to, but it's really packed. So can we break it down and kind of talk about it like line by line and see how this works? So the beginning is do not conform to this world. So we've just talked about like, okay, so here's some things that we're told are true but aren't true, but we don't have to buy into those lies just because everyone else is drinking at a party or everyone else has picked up their phone to scroll on their phone or everybody else bought that new pair of shoes, whatever the thing is, we don't have to. So how can we bravely say no? We're not going to step in the crowd when everyone else is. Where are we going to find that courage?
Yeah, and it does take courage. I mean, let's be honest, it's really counterculture to just move against whatever the flow is, whatever the grain is. It's a strong current out there. And like I mentioned earlier, we really do live in a very alcohol-centric society. The tide is changing a bit. I've watched it, like to think that I'm a small part of moving the needle to just kind of bring to light even more of what's going on. But I feel like oftentimes alcohol is like the guest of honor.
Yeah.
It's literally like even, girls trips or Valentine's Day. So I think courage first comes within, from within. Obviously, that's going to be, as a believer, that's going to be with the power of the Holy Spirit to ignite the fuse, to give us the
Yes.
power to do what it is we deep down really want to do, instead of being like, Paul, why do I do the very things I don't want to do? That's different parts of us in conflict with each other. That's that mental tug of war and that cognitive dissonance that is so exhausting when you're trying to do what you want to do or what you feel is the right thing, what God's calling you to, and then we're fighting against it inside. So it's an inside job. This is not about what other people are doing. And I think to walk in a room and not look around at what other people are doing to get your cue for what you're doing is a big deal at any age.
Yeah. And doesn't it take a lot of mental preparation to be like,
It does.
okay, I know I'm going to
Yep.
this party tonight. I know I'm going on this girls' weekend. I know when so and so throws brunch, they always have mimosas. Like, I know this is going to happen. Or I know at 5 o'clock every night, I'm tempted to
Pretty
crack
predictable.
open. So, I think part of how we can bravely say no is to be like, okay, I know this is coming. I'm going to intentionally have a plan B. And we can talk about some of those plan Bs in a little bit. But part of it's
Yeah.
intentionality. Part of it, as you said, it comes from within, but the power that raised Christ from the dead lives in us, Ephesians 1
It's
tells
pretty
us.
powerful. Yeah.
That's pretty powerful. So we do all have the power source. So some of us are like, well, I just don't have willpower, blah, blah. You actually do. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy to tap into. I'm not saying it's just like, oh, just say no. It's so easy because Jesus is in you. But we do actually have the power.
We do. And one concept that the Lord's really illuminated to me in the last couple of years is the difference between willpower and willingness.
It's good.
And we need them both, because the
Yeah.
willpower is our mind. It's our decision making. It's our choice. You know, God gave us the power to choose. That's our free will. And that's very powerful as well, especially when we partner with Him to do it. But the willpower is our fortitude. It's our pre-deciding. I'm going to talk today, hopefully, about the three P's. Very important. But there comes a point in time where you've exhausted all your willpower. And this is where I have found the sweetest times with the Lord empowering me is when I come empty handed. I've exhausted all my own resources. I'm tapped out. I want the drink or I want the whatever. And I don't have the willpower anymore in my flesh, in my own accord, in my own, but I do have willingness. And I think that He takes that willingness and multiplies it.
So
And
sweet.
willingness comes from the heart. Willpower really comes from the mind. And so I just think there's just a sweetness that comes with just such surrender. That's like, I'm here. It's 5 o'clock. I'm at war within myself.
Yeah.
Something's gonna win. And it won't be my willpower, but I am willing, Holy Spirit, to give you this time. And it may be uncomfortable, but I'm going to pick my hard. And it's going to be hard now, easier later, instead of easy now, harder later.
Just in the moment, like, Jesus, I need you.
Just willingness. Yeah,
I
that
need
it's
you.
over.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. The next part of that verse is when we're not going to be conformed to the patterns of this world. We're going to do that by renewing our minds.
See?
And you have this catchy thing you say, change your thinking to change your drinking, which I love that.
Yeah.
That
I
that
tell
we do have
people
to
I actually didn't have a drinking problem. I had a thinking
a
problem.
thinking problem. So I love this. Like it's
It's
straight from
true.
Romans, right? So we can
Yeah.
change our thinking. So how can we, and we started to touch on it a second ago, um, when we're intentionally thinking through how can we have like almost a list of activities in um our toolbox
Yeah.
that when we know
Good
we're
use of a
tempted
word right
to
there.
fall
Yeah.
into whatever our toxic behavior is, that we can kind of pull out as a healthier substitute.
Yeah. And you really do need a toolbox and you need a lot of different tools in there. I know for me, for example, with drinking, it was a tool. I just used it too often for too many different things. Like I mentioned, if I were bored, lonely, anxious, tired, celebrating, it was like, tee it up. I mean, that was what was in my toolbox.
Right.
And I didn't realize that I had minimized the amount of tools I could choose from and that I wasn't really listening to my body anymore. I was doing things on autopilot
Mhm.
versus that intentional mindset, that intentional living.
Yeah.
So, I think devaluing alcohol, that's a thinking thing, is such a process. Over time, I went from not valuing alcohol at all to slowly valuing it more to then it being very valuable to me. Like something is not fun without it. Like I don't know if I can, face conflict without a little edge taken off. Like I really did value it. And so to devalue it is a process. You can't just take out a habit. Now I'm just going back to just again mindset habit loop stuff. Have you read Habits with James Clear?
I'm familiar with it.
So good. And so you can't just take out a habit and leave a hole there. A lot of what we do is based on habits. And so here's the three P's because you were kind of asking what are some things that we can put in our toolbox?
Yeah.
And again, I think this totally applies to a lot of things, not just alcohol or drinking. But I call them the three P's. We're going to pre-decide. We're going to pre-plan and then we can play the movie forward. So what this looks like is much like you mentioned earlier, before you get to the brunch where mimosas are going to be flowing. That's okay. But you can know that ahead of time. And if you try to decide, oftentimes when you're in a circumstance, it is just so difficult. It's almost just so uphill. The chances of you making it up are really slim because you've not really set yourself up for a lot of success,
Right.
practically speaking. Pre-deciding before you get there is really key. And then pre-planning. Again, you can pre-decide you're not drinking, for example, or that you're going to the brunch. If you've already pre-decided, no, today a mimosa is not for me. Well, what are you going to do instead?
Hmm.
What do you say? What do you order? Having a game plan, walking in with something rolling off your tongue to say, walking in with a beverage already. Have a plan. Again, if we go with the flow, which we can tend to do, oh, the flow is going to take us all right. It's going to take us maybe where we don't want to go.
Right.
And then my favorite tool, I teach this a lot in SoberSis, is playing the movie forward. I believe God is so awesome that He gave us an imagination really, and the ability to kind of see how this is going to go based on our experience. I mean, thank God, literally, that I can look back and learn from other people's experience or my own what I want to do in the future. And so I know, for example, if I were in my drinking days and I were to open a bottle of wine at 5 o'clock just to have one, play the movie forward, would I really have just one? Probably not, because the one kind of orders the second one. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, of the substance. So alcohol literally creates a thirst for itself. It really does. And so typically, that would not be the way it would go down. I wouldn't literally open the bottle and have a 4 ounce, little pour. I would have more than that. In fact, we'll just see how the evening goes. I would just go with the flow. And so playing the movie forward can go either way. I love to play the movie forward with what you do want.
Mhm.
You can certainly play it forward with what you don't want, which is probably drinking more than you intended, losing track of time, becoming less present, losing productivity. Then you start to get into your sleep. Oh my gosh, I can just go on and on. And then you've got the 3 a.m. wake up call, and then you've got how you feel the next morning. You can play that forward and know if you open that bottle or if you start drinking and you've got a pattern. Again, you're not broken, but your pattern may be broken, and that
Right.
can be changed. So if that pattern has been there where you say you're just going to have one and it's rarely that way, well, play the movie forward, but then play the movie forward if you choose something else. How do you want to sleep? How do you want to wake up? I plan my Friday nights based on the Saturday I want to have. And now I'll double down on the science and say I plan my Friday night based on how I want to feel on Tuesday, because
Yeah.
that's how far it lingers
Right.
into our chemical makeup.
Right. No, I'm reminded of a couple of things when you're talking. I'm one of those like books that our kids read when they were little where you could choose your own ending, right? And so the main character, it's like, do they say this or do they not? And then the story goes based on what you choose the character, and you turn to page 56 if you chose this thing, and
Oh, yeah.
to
Yeah.
page 38 if you chose this thing, and you can kind of pick, and you're saying creatively we can do that same thing. We can be like, we
Yeah.
know if we're bored and we hop on Amazon and start buying things, we open that bottle of wine, we fill in the blank with whatever toxic behavior we may have. We can play forward like we know on page 58 actually what happens on page 59.
Exactly. And if we get on Amazon and just mindlessly start buying things, then we've got the cumber of like, now what I bought stuff I don't need. What am I going to do? And drinking and Amazon shopping can tend to go
Oh,
hand in
that's a
hand.
bad combo.
You can double dip.
Bad combo. I'm also reminded when you were talking about being like prepared for when you enter into a situation. One of my sons, actually, both my sons have gluten allergies. And when they were little, like we'd go to a birthday party or it was Pizza Friday at school. And I didn't send my boys empty handed into those situations. I knew if they were going to be at a birthday party, I had to bake something ahead of time and send in with them some gluten free brownies or cupcakes or something.
The other cupcake.
So they could have a safe treat. And on Pizza Fridays, I made sure we had gluten-free pizza that I packed in their lunchbox so they could still have pizza on it. But I wasn't just going to let them go to school and see what happened. I
Right.
wasn't going to just send
Why
them into
would we
that
do
birthday
that? Right.
party and like, well, hopefully my kid won't choose the cupcake even though they like know it's bad for them, but they're 8, so they might like, no, I'll give them a great treat, but that I know is healthy for them. And I think that's what you're saying too. So what are some of the things we can do
Very much.
that are you give some good ones in your book, so some lovely things we can do for ourselves when we're feeling exhausted, overwhelmed. I mean, obviously prayer is a beautiful thing to do in this time. Reading scripture is, worship is, connecting with the Lord because he is the answer. But you give some more just like tangible, kind of like a girl like you and I live in our lives things that we
Yeah.
can add in too. So what are some of those things we can add in, Jen?
Totally. Yeah, I wrote a few down here. First one, switch your stuff around. Like if you're struggling at around 3 p.m. with that low blood sugar, that's when kind of the poor drinking, eating habits start to kind of like the sugar cravings, all of it starts to set in. That's maybe not the best time to go to the grocery store. Flip that around. Go in the morning when your willpower, your mindset is highest, decision fatigue is not set in. Have good options. Again, you just touched on that so well with your kids with other food options. So if you're used to having a drink in a certain setting or just even in your own kitchen, because again, that's so prevalent. I had no idea that so many other moms were, kind of drinking on, Wednesday night because I mean, when in Rome, I mean, you're at home, you're not driving, you're just cooking. That's kind of boring. This kind of makes it more fun. Does it really? So it's so easy to do. So having good options, you can't open your refrigerator and look at just, water and milk. I mean, you can, but I like to open my refrigerator and feel like, oh my gosh, I have so many choices. I have
Mhm.
so many options. I'm not short on, a sparkling water with lime in a pretty glass. Or, I mean, I can go on and on. If your followers want more, I've got so many resources to share, alcohol-free options that will do all kinds of stuff for
Yeah, I'm
your.
gonna add in the show notes, guys, Jen's mocktail recipe book
Oh,
because it
yeah.
has lots of fun options there that you can be
Yeah,
making
there's
for
so
yourself.
many.
So I'm gonna pop that in the show notes.
Connect with others. Go on a walk. Oh my gosh, evening walks are the best. And when I was drinking, it was just kind of like I shut down and just kind of ended up in front of the TV, just binge watching. I wasn't doing anything with my hands. When I first started shifting this habit, my hands got back to creativity. I'm a little crafter, so I would just start decoupaging stuff.
Awesome.
Before I knew it, they were everywhere. But yeah, a lot of that was pre-planning and pre-deciding.
That's awesome. Okay, so we said we're not going to conform to the patterns of this world and we are going to renew our minds. And when we decide we're not going to conform and we're going to change our minds, the last part of Romans 12 says, then we can live in God's perfect will and we will hear his voice and walk in it. So, Jenn, you've done the work here. You've spent time being intentional and calling out the lies and finding substitutes in your life and walking through this even when it's hard. And like you said, being willing even when your willpower is shut down. Can you describe how intentionally deciding to fight culture and change your thinking has changed your life and how you hear God better?
Yeah, it's huge. It's changed my life completely. Um, the sneaky little habit was really changing this habit, this place in my life that I'd given over such control of my mind and my heart. It was the lead domino for me. I knew it was right before I turned 46 and now I'm 50, 53. I'm not sure when this is airing. I'll probably still be 53. So I just knew for me, there were a lot of things in my life that I wanted to have change and be better. But I knew that this could potentially be the lead domino because it affected my energy, it affected my confidence, it affected my sleep, it affected my connection with others in that way. And so for me, how it's changed my life, it's put me on a freedom journey,
I love that.
just an absolute freedom journey. There's a big difference between being sober and being sober minded. I really look at being sober as more abstinence from something. Typically, when someone identifies as being sober, they're, clean and sober. And it's a pretty loaded word. It's got a lot of stigma and stereotype that comes with that. With the word sober, although I am choosing an alcohol free lifestyle, I really, really think the freedom comes with focusing more on what you are doing, not what you're not doing.
Mhm.
And so for me, and what I've invited so many women into the conversation to have is more about freedom and what we are doing and what we are pursuing than focusing on something we're not doing or who we don't want to become. We're focusing on who we are already, that we, like you mentioned, at the top, we already are all that we need to be. We just need to walk in it and live in it. And
So you
so
feel since you've stopped drinking that you're walking more in who you're supposed to be?
and I wrote this down to Dr. John Townsend, who's a friend of mine, and one of my favorite authors.
Oh,
He says grace plus truth plus time equals change. Grace plus truth plus time equals change.
that's
And
good.
that to me is the journey I'm on. It's like an ingredient list. It's like a recipe. And I needed all of those things. I needed the grace. I needed the time to practice a new pattern, a new way of thinking with my renewed mind. Because I've even learned, and I think we have, some mutual friends who are talking more about this in the science realm, but our mind and our brain are really two different things.
Mhm.
And so you can get a mindset upgrade, kind of like a software update, and your brain still be wired for a different way of being and thinking. And so that takes time. That takes time to get your brain to align with your new mindset. You can listen to this podcast, you can read my book, you can do a lot of things to upgrade or up level your mindset. But a lot of things just take practice, repetition, and time. And that's where the brain science comes in.
Yeah,
And
and
that's fascinating.
yeah, how cool that God has, for those of you who haven't looked, excuse me, into this, our brains are neuroplastic, which means they can change, that they're like, we can change the pathways of our brain. That neuroplasticity means like they're kind of squishy and moldable. Dr. Caroline Leaf does a lot of work on this. I saw you quoted her in your book. And it means if you have a pathway that you are always leaning towards that toxic behavior and your brain just, that's its habit, that we can teach our brain to have a new pathway by repetitively creating a new habit. So maybe that's going on a walk when you would normally go for a drink or
Right.
do whatever toxic behavior. Maybe it means you always treat yourself to a bath then, or you always call your favorite person then, or whatever the thing is. And you train your brain when you're starting to feel that way. Well, that's actually my prayer time every day. Oh, that's actually the time I go for a walk and get some fresh air. And soon, not overnight, but eventually our
Yeah.
brains are retrained to be like, when I'm feeling that way, I always turn on my worship music. Like, you
Right.
just have
And
this
just
new
acknowledge
pathway.
the feeling, or acknowledge the craving. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or that, you're a failure or something's not working. It just means that's what your brain is doing. That's maybe the pattern it knows. So, but just being so gracious and so kind with ourselves. We're so compassionate and kind with other people, with our kids or our friends. I mean, if they slip up or make a mistake, we're like, that's okay. And when we do that ourselves, one of the hallmarks of our sisterhood is progress over perfection. And we talk a lot about how any slip up or data point, we'll call it recon, is not a setback unless you make it one. Instead, it's actually valuable feedback. And so for me, when I was trying to change my relationship with drinking, I did it with a bunch of rules in isolation and all willpower. That sounds
It's
horrible.
so
That did
hard,
not
right?
work.
So hard.
It just was, and I would get so defeated and so down on myself when I would just give in or succumb to the atmosphere I was in. I have a husband who drinks socially, and most of my friends do. So if I was trying to do this by myself, there was just a point in time where I just couldn't stand alone. But I would view that quote slip up from my perfect goal as such an incredible setback. And I'm an Enneagram 1. I don't know how much you know about that paradigm, but just a lot of, perfectionism and performance and pressure. And that's what I put on myself when I was trying to change a habit that was no longer serving me. In fact, it never really did. And so when I applied all of those P's, those are the wrong P's. We want the other P's, the pre-decide, the pre-plan, the play the movie forward. I was using all the other P's, performance, pressure, perfectionism. And so when I would make a mistake or just not follow all my own rules, it was devastating for me. I felt like such a failure and such a loser. And when you feel that way, what do you want to do? You want to numb out. You want to not feel. And so that's why I really invite anyone who's wanting to change any um, habit in their life or an area that is not working is just to be so kind with yourself and allow yourself to learn as you go, because you are retraining your brain.
Yeah. No, I love that, because we have to give ourselves grace, because Jesus gives us endless grace.
Yeah.
So we have to
Yeah,
give
who are
ourselves
we
grace
to
too.
override his grace?
Right. No, so you touched on briefly about how you tried to do it alone and that didn't work. And you talk about in Look Life Says how important community is. And obviously, you have created an online community, SoberSis, to help people make these changes in their lives. The women in the Bible are all about, we see them often like relying on each other. We see Priscilla needs Aquila to do all of their ministry together. Not that she needs a man, but they need each other. They need
Yeah.
people to do it together. And we see that, Naomi and Ruth overcome a lot of things together. And how would you say community helps us get out of toxic loops into healthier ones?
I love this question because it's been the biggest game changer. Even more than the science is the connection, because actually science behind the connection. We are designed for community. We are wired to be in relationship with others in effort to grow. In order to grow, we do that through and with other people. God designed it that way for us to need each other. This is a very personal journey. I think a lot of your listeners are like, I don't know if I want to talk about this with other people. I get that. I really, really do. Because as a Christian mom, I was so afraid of being misunderstood or, labeled, or would they understand the nuances, or would they see me as the problem instead of alcohol as a solution to maybe some deeper things that were going on, some sadness, some fear, some frustration, some anxiety. And it wasn't until I found a like-minded group of women to, buddy up with. You almost need like
Yeah.
the buddy system, like a
Support
like a wing
system.
woman. So this is a personal journey, but it's not a solo one. There's a difference between
That's
personal
good.
and solo. And so I love the verses. Two of my favorite, Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loves at all times. A brother," in this case sister, "is born for adversity." And Ecclesiastes, "If either of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up." So that's
Yeah.
a lot of what this connection is. It's, what do you do when you're not perfect? What do you do when you're struggling? What do you do when the pressure is? What do you do when you're going to a girls' weekend and you need that accountability, but not in a judgmental, let me check up on you, but more like, how are you doing? How can I support you? What do you need? And just someone who cares, someone who can really see you for who you are. So I think it's incredibly important.
Well, Satan tries to get us alone, right? He wants to get us alone. He wants to shame us into thinking that people will think poorly of us if they knew about any toxic behavior we have. And that's where it's dark, and he can just keep continuing to feed his lies to us. Once we share it with someone who we trust, not just a random person on the internet, right? Like who, like you have a very safe community on the internet that's guided and vetted and
Oh, yeah.
healing. And, once you've shared it with a safe person, Satan can't yell those lies at you as much because someone else is saying, that's not true. Like, that's not true. No, that's
Yeah.
not true. Like, you're not alone in this. I'm here with you. Like, you don't need that to be accepted. I accept you without that, right? Like, so this community is so important. I mean, God says from the very beginning in Genesis, it is not good for mankind, humans, to be alone. It's not good for us to be alone.
Well, and Brene Brown talks a lot, she's the shame researcher. And she says basically, if you put shame in a petri dish and then you apply a drop of empathy into that shame, shame really can't survive.
Love it
It's
so much.
empathy that counteracts that shame, and that shame storm, that shame spiral, like I mentioned earlier when I tried all the P's, the perfection, the
Right.
performance, the pressure. Oh my gosh, I was just in my own petri dish of then more shame, more frustration, more drinking to combat how bad I felt about myself, which made it worse. It was actually a spiral. It was a shame spiral. But empathy, if I can get into a group with other women who are like, I get it. And the craving's there, or the thought is there, or the habit is there, but that's not who you are.
Right.
That's just something you're doing, or something
Right.
you're struggling with. It's not an identity. It's not who you are. I see you. It's such a game changer. And it is about being with like-minded people who share the same goal, whatever that goal may be for you,
Right.
the
Yeah.
like-mindedness.
No, that's awesome. So, Jen, what about the woman who wants to stop drinking? She's listening. She's like, that rosé all day t-shirt I have on, maybe I don't need rosé all day. Maybe and maybe, listen, guys, we're not bashing alcohol in this episode. We're just saying that all of us are falling into habits that might not be healthy for us. And it could be drinking, it could be spending, it could be lots of things. But we want to be intentional in how we live. We don't want to conform to the patterns of this world. We want to renew our mind so that we can hear God's perfect will for us. So we're saying consider what you're using. Consider
Right. Go back to
what you're doing.
sober-minded living
Right.
versus sober or sobriety being maybe the goal. I mean, again, I know everyone's got a different view on that, but my view is, yeah, focus on the sober-mindedness, because that's more encompassing to a lot of these choices and habits. And because if you don't go to what the root of the core driver and motivation for the numbing behavior, you're just going to find a different solution
You're just going
to
to
the
switch
problem.
habits.
So it's really not about drinking, and it's really not about spending. You're exactly right. It's really about, and that's what I would say to someone who is listening, who's like, okay, I'm picking up what they're putting down. I want this sober mindedness. And the first way to do that is through awareness and curiosity. When we're living on autopilot and not really popping the hood in our own life. We're just driving along, we're on cruise control. What would happen if you put your blinker on, pull out, go with my analogy here, pull off the drinking highway, head over to a rest stop, and just pop the hood and see why a couple of the warning lights were on. You know, if you've got a flat tire, don't slash all three. Fix the tire that's low.
That's good.
So that's the curiosity piece. And until we're willing, and it's very brave to be curious because you're not, it also is vulnerable because it's uncertain.
Right.
Vulnerability, really, that's the definition, is the uncertainty is what makes it vulnerable. You're just not sure what you're going to find or how it's going
Right.
to go or if you
Right.
can do this. So it's very brave to be curious. But what if on the other side of that curiosity was more freedom?
Mm-hmm.
What if more freedom was available if all you were willing to be curious without judgment
Yeah.
of
I love it.
yourself? Man, the
I love
freedom
it.
is just there for the taking.
And it's
Go get it.
freedom that Christ for freedom that Christ has set us
Yes,
free. That's what he
this is a
wants for us
freedom
for
journey.
sure. I love it. I love it. So anyone who you're listening and you're just kind of curious and you don't know where to start with being curious. Like what is going on? Be
And
aware
jot
of what you're
jot some
doing.
notes down. One of the exercises we do in our group, literally on day one of this monthly challenge that I have, is day one. Why do you want to drink? Why do you not want to drink? Why do we do the things we do? Let's not even judge it. Let's not even call it good, bad, right, or wrong.
Just
Let's just
why,
start to
when.
why
Yeah.
why I mean, my list was long for both.
Yeah.
I had a long list going for either one, but that began the kind of tilling up the soil, if you will,
I love it.
so that I could plant these new seeds in my mind to even
Mhm.
begin to grow.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And you guys, I will link all kinds of stuff for Jen's website on here. So if you are curious and want to know how to get started, she has tons of great resources. And just by following her or going to her website, you can find lots of ways if you are curious and want to be aware. She has all kinds of ways to get you started. Jen, I forgot to ask you at the beginning of the podcast, and I ask everyone at the beginning, but I'm
Yeah.
asking you near the end, who's your favorite woman of the Bible and why?
I'm ready. I'm ready for that question,
All
Brett,
right,
and I love
amazing.
your question,
You've
and
been
I
waiting the whole
really
show.
thought
I
about it.
told you I'd ask you at the top.
So I was like, maybe she'll go back. No, you did. That's good. No, I really, really, really thought about this. And so I love your question. I think it's so awesome because there are many amazing women in the Bible.
For
And of
sure.
course we could go for the Esthers, the Deborahs, the ones we kind of think of, but I'm gonna go for a different one. I'm gonna go for a nameless woman.
Oh, good. I love
Uh,
that. They're some of my favorites. Let's hear which one are you choosing?
I'm gonna go for the nameless woman. I'm gonna go for the nameless woman in Luke 8 who touched the hem of Jesus' outer robe and was immediately healed because of her faith, her personal trust and confidence in him. She is one of my favorites because it's a remarkable miracle and it shows how really the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, right there was the Son, who was so attuned to her inner thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that was enough. And he saw her without even physically seeing her. Oh my gosh. So I love her.
I love her too.
I
I love
love
her
her. I
too.
love her that she was just like, all I need is just a touch. And I don't know if you watched the series The Chosen. I've not seen it all, but I've seen parts of it and I went and rewatched that part
Mm-hmm.
and just loved it where he's like, wait, who touched me? I just felt healing power leave my body.
Yeah.
Oh man.
No, big fan of The
So
Chosen. No, and I think that's just such a great reminder about everything we've been talking about today. If you're in some sort of toxic behavior and you want healing from it, the first step really is to reach out to Jesus because he
yeah.
is a healer and he loves you so much. And I love that in that moment, he's in a big crowd. He's actually on the way to raise someone else back
Right. Right.
from death to life. He's on a very important mission, but he stops everything for her and he turns to her and calls her daughter. Like this is who we are to him. We are that one was an outcast. If you were bleeding in that time, you were considered unclean and you had to be quarantined. So she had been quarantined for 12 years. Talk about isolated, feeling
Talk
lonely,
about it.
feeling like an outcast. And he stops everything to remind everyone around who she is. She is my daughter.
Yeah.
I will touch her. She is to be included, not excluded. So that's how Jesus feels about everyone listening. No matter how you feel about yourself, Jesus includes you. He invites you in. He sees you. He wants to restore you, and he calls you his daughter. I love
Yeah.
it so much. Thanks for bringing her up. Yes, she is also one of
Oh,
my
she's
faves.
awesome.
She's one of my faves. Okay. So, last but not least, Jen, since the name of the show is Brave Woman, Mighty God, I ask each guest what is something brave you're going to do this weekend. You are doing brave work all the time. You've done the brave work of stepping away from a toxic habit, and now you're doing the brave work of helping others do that. But just this coming week, what's something brave you're going to do, Jen?
Well, I have the privilege and honor of doing several podcast interviews this week. And every time I do, I take each one I take it so to heart because I heard someone on a podcast. I heard the message initially through someone else's story of this sober curiosity and of an alcohol-free lifestyle. I believe God can use anyone and anything at any time to get his message across. And so I think it feels brave that here I am, 8 years later on my own journey, still showing up because there's still a woman at the kitchen sink. That's who I call her. She's the nameless woman. God knows her name, who
Right.
is at the kitchen sink on, I mean, we're taping this on a Tuesday. Somebody may listen to it on a Thursday or a weekend, doesn't matter. But they're at their kitchen sink and they're on their third glass of wine and they're cleaning the dishes and they're thinking, it's 8 p.m. How in the world did I get here? I just was going to open the bottle and have a glass at 5 while I was cooking. Now I'm on my third. What is going on? How did I get here? And she feels alone and she feels isolated and she feels less than. She feels broken. And she'll get up and go to a workout class tomorrow after she leaves Bible study. And she's the woman I do this podcast for.
I love that. That makes me tear up.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you for doing the work that you do. Thank you. Amen. It is very brave. So thank you for keep showing up and everyone listening. You guys are brave too. So bravely show up for yourselves. Bravely show up because Jesus loves you. Jen, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so grateful for you and your work.
I loved it. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me on that great conversation with Jenn Kautsch, aka SoberSis. What great reminders of how we can fight toxic behaviors, renew our minds, fight culture, not be conformed to the patterns of this world, and live more fully present in the love and light and joy Jesus has for us. I love how Jen emphasized that we can start just by being aware and curious about how and why and what we're doing, especially when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. To find more from Jen, to order her book or join her 21-day challenge, I put all the links for you in the show notes. I've also linked her free mocktail recipe book. Make sure you're subscribing to the Brave One Mighty God podcast so you won't miss the next awesome episode. And for more ways to tap into the courage our mighty God has empowered you with, grab a copy of my latest book, Brave Woman, Mighty God. It's designed for individual or group study, and it's available at booksellers everywhere. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Reviews really help others find this content. Praying for you as you intentionally, courageously step into whatever God has for you this week, and that you remember that mighty Jesus loves you and will give you everything you need.